Here at Gaze Talking Straight, we care about your health and well-being. We are not medical experts or healthcare professionals. Nothing we say should be construed as medical advice. If you have questions or concerns about your health or well-being, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to Gaze Talking Straight. I'm your host, Richard Lamberty. I'm here with Gregory Highfill. Pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
So you've been watching our videos, and we have been chatting back and forth, and it's really been fun to reconnect with you.
Absolutely.
So I think it was June of 2009 when we first met.
Yes.
And that was at the center, and we had the opportunity to get to know each other a little bit back then.
Yes.
And so, that gave me a little bit of a window into your life. And that was right at the time that I had moved in with my mother and started to become her caregiver, which was a role that you were already serving for your father.
Yes.
And I remember having some conversations with you about, what that experience was like, and calling you on the phone a couple of times in, the crazy panic moments of. But I want to go back in time with you and talk about how caregiving has manifested in your life multiple times and what that's been like for you as a kind of a life journey.
It's been interesting, to say the very least. In 1985, when they came out with the test for HIV, which back then was HTLV3, my partner had been getting weird symptoms, and the doctor suggested a test to see if he was positive. He was. So not surprisingly, he wanted to test me, and I was also positive.
So mid-80s.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was terminal.
Oh, that was a
They're
death
gonna die.
sentence. There was no treatment. There was
Nothing.
not a lot of understanding.
In fact, my partner, Dennis, was in the case study for AZT.
Oh, wow. Which was the first drug
The
that
first
they put
drug.
out. And the doses were high.
Oh my gosh.
Toxic to the body.
Yes.
But they were transforming the lives of HIV positive people that were so seriously ill, just causing all these other problems.
Yes.
And for some people, like, the cure was worse than the illness.
Yes. In fact, they had to take him off of it before the trial was over, because he'd gone severely anemic and needed blood transfusions, and they said, well, we can't do this for you. Which also, for me, said, you don't ever want to take this, it's poison. So, I had that in my mind. The thing that I remember the most is I had a high T cell count.
Okay, so T cells are part of the immune system.
Yes.
And one of the things that happens with HIV is it actually attacks the immune system and uses the immune system to attack the body.
Yes.
So one of the markers for illness is the reduction of T cells.
Exactly.
And because AIDS is a syndrome. HIV is the infection. AIDS is a syndrome, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. And the way that they looked at it was if your T cells fell below 200, you had AIDS, as opposed to HIV infection.
Yes.
And it was considered a permanent diagnosis of disability.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dennis's T cells were very, very low. I don't remember the exact number.
I remember people, watching the numbers go down and getting, below 200, below 150, below 100, below 70, below 50, below 20, and no detectable T cells, and the body's being ravaged by the autoimmune or the opportunistic illnesses.
Well, it didn't take very long after the test before Dennis was in the hospital with PCP pneumonia, which is an opportunistic infection, and that gave him an AIDS diagnosis.
Yes.
And immediately he was on disability. That was it.
And how old was he?
At that time, he was, I want to say 35.
And how old were you?
2 years younger.
Okay.
So I was about 33.
33, the age they killed Christ.
Yes.
So you did a little better.
I had some guilt feelings because when we reached out for a support group and help, when people found out my T cell count was 1350,
Ooh.
I got teased about getting mugged in the parking lot for my T cells.
That's a high number. I mean,
Yes.
even for in an ordinary test of a
Yes.
person, that's just a high number.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in fact, I did not require medication for 9 years.
Wow. So you were long-term non-progressive.
Yes.
They had a phrase for people like you.
Well, the way I look at it is I inherited my father's immune system, which was very strong. But still, this sounds outrageous, but even in that period of time, I had like survivor's guilt.
I understand that. I knew so many people that felt guilty that everyone they knew was dying,
Yes.
and they weren't. And often these were guys that were, just as much in the clubs, just as much in the bathhouses, but for some reason they had been left untouched. And it was devastating to a lot of people to watch everyone they knew and loved die in slow motion. And so that was a common experience.
Oh, yes. As Dennis's disease progressed, I was put into the role of caregiver. I had to take care of him.
Where were you living then?
Kansas City, Missouri.
Wow. So not exactly a liberal.
It is, really. It's
Then
like a
was it?
liberal island in a conservative state.
Wow. Okay, learn something new.
Yes, yes. Very supportive
Interesting.
of both the gay community and the HIV community. I was very proud of the way the community came together and embraced us and made a decision. We're not going to do the horrible things we've heard that are done on the coasts. The isolating the AIDS patient and
The head-to-toe suits and the
that
doctors refusing to come in the room. And
leaving their dinner tray on the floor at their door like they could get up and get it. I mean, just horrible stories. Mortuaries.
refusing bodies.
Refusing bodies. My best friend in California at the time would actually do makeup for people that had passed from HIV/AIDS.
Because
The mortuary did not want to touch them. They'd throw them in the casket, and it's whatever you can do to make them look decent.
See, so this was the mid-'80s. I was still in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And that was my first case that I knew of, was a very good friend of my boyfriend there. And small town, an infection, rapid death, and the parents were amazing. They wanted everybody to know what had happened, and they wanted people to get tested, anybody that might have been with him in some way. It was, again, the compassion that wasn't evident in some of the places.
Yes.
So you had Dennis, and you were taking care of him.
Yes. And while I was taking care of him, and as I watched his disease progress, me in just a few short years, I was kind of terrified and kind of not, if that makes any sense. I was too preoccupied with the tasks at hand to dwell on my own problems and fears and anxieties.
But you were still working.
Yes, I was
And
working full time, yes.
but caregiver in that role itself could be a full-time job,
Absolutely.
especially when someone is that weak,
Yes.
and not much that you can really do.
Towards the final stages, I rented a hospital bed and did some rearranging in the dining room to put a hospital bed in and still have eye shot to the television, because that was the only thing he had left was television.
Right.
That was a great help, and it also relieved my worry of, major falls, 2-story house. Oh my God, what if he falls down the stairs? Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And very lucky, he belonged to a Catholic church. And there was a lady there who was fantastic. Her sons retired her to do the volunteer work for the church that she had been doing, so she could do that full time.
So when we were talking earlier, you said something to me about your experience at that time, because that was also a period in your life where you were coming to terms with who you were, what was going on for
yes.
you. And
Yes.
you had told me about a friend that had come over, and then you went outside and were talking for 10 minutes or so, and you had this thought.
That was a turning point in my life. I had struggled accepting myself due to society, due to religion. I was just an unacceptable human being as a gay man.
Mm-hmm.
I did not express homophobia outwardly, and for that I'm grateful. But I did cram a lot internally.
A lot of us do.
Yes, we do. And there was an evening where a good friend of ours came over to visit. And after the visit, I walked him out to his car, which was parked on the street. And he and I, continued to have a conversation about, how I was handling everything and, do you need more help? Things like that. And after we finished chatting, we hugged. He got in his car and left. And I stood there and I looked at the house. And Dennis was inside the house, of course. And the thought entered my head, sweetie, you ain't going to get any gayer than having a partner dying from AIDS. And the turning point was I made a conscious decision to reject what had been placed on me in my youth. I was still young then, but in my 20s and teens and all that. Mm-hmm. I was going to reject that, and I was going to stand up and say, hey, I'm a gay man. If you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine.
But in that moment, you found self-acceptance.
Yes, absolutely.
And how do you get acceptance from the world if you can't accept yourself first?
Exactly.
So, I think that alone is this incredibly powerful message that still needs to be echoed today, said
Absolutely.
over and over again. Learn to love who you are.
Absolutely.
And then go to the world with that love.
Absolutely. That needs to be a big point in gay subculture, especially with youth. Things are so much better now than they used to be, but there's still problems. There are still the anti-gay bigots out there, and they spew their poison.
Well, I think there's still plenty of self-destructive behavior.
Yes.
Self-hating the internalized homophobia, even if people are appearing more accepting of themselves and the world is more accepting of them, that internalized homophobia, that self-loathing, it's still there. And how, helping young people know, love yourself for who you are. We're going to love you too.
Yes.
Thank you. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. You can find our podcast on your favorite outlets or go to www.gaystalkingstraight.com. Thank you for being a part of Gays Talking Straight.